guys, welcome to Chloe's Clinic. I'm your host, Chloe Collins, clinical nutritionist and women's health expert. I help women to live with a healthy cycle so that they can become their most authentic self. Here in Chloe's Clinic, I'm going to be speaking to real women just like you about their own health journeys. We are here to talk about all things women's health. There is nothing that is not on the table, taboo or not taboo. My main goal is to educate, open up vulnerable conversations, and shed light on all things women's health, so that women are enabled and empowered to make the most informed decisions about their own body and health. Welcome to episode number 1. This is my story. When I first began brainstorming for this podcast, I thought about educational topics, all sorts of topics around women's reproductive health, and how we can best educate women and men about these. And it just didn't feel like enough. And then I thought I had a brilliant idea. I thought my whole life's work is speaking about taboo women's health topics. Like, seriously, get me at a dinner table, and if I have the chance, I will chew someone's ear off. Funnily enough, I find that I actually attract these conversations and I build amazing connections with women because that's what I put out into the universe. I want to have open and vulnerable conversations and open up a healthy conversation around women's health so that women can relate, and also so that people who have women in their lives who are on their own reproductive health journey are able to have a basic understanding of what they are going through and, if warranted, initiate a vulnerable conversation. This led me to think that I want to share stories with women in my clinic. Real life stories, and educate that way instead of just lecturing you about topics and basically sending you to sleep. This idea really lit me up inside, and I'm so excited to bring this to you. So I discussed this idea with my marketing manager. We had a brainstorm and she offered me this. She suggested that in order to open up the conversation and interview women about their stories, that I should actually begin by sharing my own story. Now, I knew that this was possibly going to be a step that I was going to take, and I have thought about it in the past. However, when she mentioned this, completely unexpectedly, a lump appeared in my throat and my eyes welled up with tears. And then I began full on crying. Something deeper than in my conscious mind came up in me, and it really took me by surprise. It made me realize how much I've been holding my own journey and story back due to my own subconscious fear. So, if I want women to show up and be vulnerable, if I want men to be vulnerable, if I want everyone to be able to talk to each other about these topics, if this is my big vision, I can't ask others to be vulnerable and to let me see all of them if I'm not prepared to be vulnerable myself. I can't ask you to come on my podcast and tell me about your journey if I can't practice what I preach. So I knew that I may have to face this one day. Today I want to tell you about my personal journey, and it's hard. Before I tell you about my journey, I want to begin with why it's so hard. I'm a clinical nutritionist and a women's health expert. I work with women in all areas of women's health, including women who are trying to conceive or have been diagnosed with infertility. I had a subconscious belief that if the women who I help and treat knew this and knew my personal story, that they would think that I was a failure. I also held the belief that everyone would think that I was a failure. I have worked very hard to overcome this, and I honestly thought that I had. It just goes to show that when we have our own battles, it's a constant learning journey of overcoming them and reminding ourselves to live in our truth. So when this was brought up by my marketing manager and I broke down just a little bit, this made me realize that, holy shit, I have not overcome this. I have more work to do. This is a story that I have never shared with my audience, my clients, or even my family members. To be truthful, not many people have asked. Women's health topics can be vulnerable and icky for many people if they aren't on that level. But once again, how can I expect people to be vulnerable if I have not completely committed to it myself? Brene Brown says that it is a paradox that we face as humans. Vulnerability is the last thing I want you to see in me, but the first thing that I look for in you. I highly recommend that you check out Brene Brown's books, by the way, if you haven't already. I understand that people are scared as to how to approach women's health topics, and that is exactly what I want to address with this podcast. I want people to know how to approach others when they are on their own health journey. And that may simply begin with, "Are you okay?" which may then open up a can of worms. And even better, if everyone has a basic understanding of these topics, it allows for an even deeper understanding and conversation. And if the people closest to you can't do that, it does make for a tough struggle. I'm determined to change that, and that's why I'm sharing my story with you today. So without further ado, this is my story. 1.5 years ago, I was Chloe Murray. That's my maiden name. I met my husband 4 years ago. As corny as it sounds, it was love at first sight and all that jazz. We were engaged after 2 years and we were married a year later. I had the belief that I would fall pregnant right away after we got married. With all of my knowledge and all of my studies, I really should have known better. While I understand the physiology of the female reproductive system and how conception works, including the rate at which conception can occur and the realistic time frame in which that can happen, I still subconsciously held that belief that I would not have a problem conceiving right away, and I mentally mapped out the next year of my life based on having a baby. Unfortunately, that is the perception that is out there and the expectation that is put upon us as a society. I really believe that this is partly due to the unrealistic representation in Hollywood movies. I mean, I've watched loads of rom-coms in which couples are married and they have a baby right away, or they even have a one-night stand and whoops, a baby is conceived. I haven't yet seen a movie in which a couple get married and then they're not able to conceive a baby. Too vulnerable, right? It's icky. It makes people uncomfortable. It's a consolation that I'm witnessing a rise in society in addressing these vulnerable, uncomfortable, or taboo topics, whatever you'd like to call it, on avenues like social media and in podcasts in order to change society's unrealistic expectations and skewed perceptions. So back to my story, 1.5 years later, my husband and I have still not yet conceived our baby. We are both young, fit, and healthy. We are blessed with a loving marriage, jobs that we love, a roof over our heads, healthy food on the table, and 2 adorable poodles as well. I'm in a really good place about it now. I've worked with a mindset coach and I've really changed my perspective. Seeking professional help was one of the best things that I've gifted myself to date. I've begun to trust in the universe and its divine plan, and I am constantly working on building that trust. It wasn't always this way, though. Initially, it was a really hard pill to swallow. I was doing everything right. I was having lovely ovulatory cycles, great sex, and putting so much good food into my body. It initially drove me a little crazy that it wasn't happening for us. In this time, however, both my husband and I have become better, more enlightened, more physically and mentally healthier versions of ourselves. We have had the opportunity to grow phenomenally. A fertility journey in my eyes can be just that, a window of opportunity to become your best self before your baby arrives. Even better, personally, I believe that my journey has allowed me to connect with more women on a deeper level, and I don't believe that I would be where I am professionally without it. Of all of the growth that I've made on my own journey, I still had that subconscious belief that my clients, my audience, my friends and my family would think that I was a failure. And I know that's not true. To be honest, in sharing this with you, along with more real stories to come, while I hope for it to offer relief and relatability to women listening, it has also been extremely therapeutic for me, kind of like a weight lifted off my shoulders. Maybe I should be thanking you for this therapy session. My next step in my fertility journey is really choosing to surrender and move forward. When it comes to assisted reproductive services, which may be the next step for me, I want to emphasize the fact that there is nothing to be ashamed of, that making a baby is a miracle no matter how it happens, and that proper nutrition throughout this process is really essential for success. This year, I made a pledge to be more real, more open, and more vulnerable on social media, as well as in all aspects of my business and life, because vulnerability is where true connection lies. So, in an effort to do just that, this is my story. Thank you, gorgeous woman, for tuning in with me today. Don't forget to hit subscribe if you love this podcast. By subscribing, you will be helping us to reach more women and let them know that they are not alone on their health journey. Better yet, tell your sisters, mothers, and girlfriends to tune into Chloe's clinic. Bye for now.